guys, and welcome back to my channel. Let's talk about the best and worst romances that I read this year. So I'm gonna try to keep this brief because my best and worst last video was really long. So we're just gonna blow right through these, and we will start with my worst and then go to my best. A lot of these I've spoken about a lot on my channel because I do talk about them in vlogs, and then I also do a recent romance reads videos. So if you want to hear my thoughts on these, I would recommend checking out those recent romance reads videos because they're gonna have like more in-depth thoughts. But let's jump into it. So the worst romances I have read this year, none of these aren't in any particular order, they're just a list. I didn't do like my worst of the worst and then the best of the worst, so let's just jump into it. So my first two are going to be no surprise to anybody. They are going to be 50 Shades and After by Anna Todd. So we're all kind of familiar with what these two stories are. The main reason that I would say they are my worst is because they represent a lot of negativity and toxicity in the romance space that I don't agree with. I think they promote very bad things and they put romance, the genre, in a very bad light that I just don't appreciate. I think people that don't read romance tend to already have a sort of negative view on romance, and these being so popular to the point of being made into movies and like very publicized and very popular movies, it just doesn't do well for the community, and it makes me a little bit sad that there are so many great romance writers out there that don't get recognition, but the ones that put out things that I think are toxic and shouldn't be promoted, they are put out there in the forefront. But ultimately, it's for entertainment, and I don't, especially 50 Shades, it's not targeted towards a young audience. After, I would argue that it kind of is. Adults are old enough or adult enough or mature enough to recognize healthy and unhealthy relationships and the difference between fantasy and reality, hopefully. So I can't harp on it too much, but they just weren't, neither of these were just written very well. The relationships weren't very believable. They weren't developed very well. So altogether, I just didn't like them. So next up is Welcome to the Dark Side. Age gap between a guy that is in a motorcycle gang and a girl, and they actually met when she was like 6. She's involved in a crime that he commits that he goes to prison for, and they write letters back and forth, and then when she is 17 and I think he's like 30-ish, they meet again in a bar that she works at that he runs. To start off, the writing of this was horrible. There would be like plot points that were just completely forgotten about. Like there would be people that were just like completely forgotten about, and they'd be remembered like pages later. There were just things that didn't connect. One of the things that made me feel the grossest about this was the age gap. I'm all for an age gap. Well, and you'll see that in my best books. Male main character really harps on how young she is. He talks about how young she is and how sweet and virginal she is and how she has that young body and that she's a young girl, and he talks about how he loved her before she was legal, and he just really fetishizes that aspect of her, and I hate it. It makes me feel really gross. So the next one, I gotta be honest, is on the worst because I cannot tell you a single thing about it, and it's Tell Me Pretty Lies. I think this is a forbidden new adult bully romance between a stepbrother and a sister. I really honestly couldn't tell you. I don't know anything about the plot or the characters. It was entirely forgettable. So next up is kind of painful for me, and it's Dark Lover by J.R. Ward. This is the first in a very, very popular, beloved PNR, paranormal romance series, and that I will be continuing because it's like 19 books and I know it'll get better, but this first one was bad. The writing was bad, the characters were bad. All the characters were like fit in a very archetypal way. Like they all followed the girls. All the girls followed like the virginal, like innocent type. All of the men were like the alpha, aggressive type, and I couldn't tell any of them apart. Like if you'd asked me what the difference between two characters were, I couldn't tell you. I would have no idea. But I'll continue because I'm sure it gets better, and it's a really loved series. All right, so next up is Irresistible, which is a forbidden age gap romance. I think is it age gap? Between a woman who works for her family's like wedding company or something, and her peer who is a single dad, and I guess where the forbidden aspect comes in is that they're co-workers. This was so disappointing because this book is really hyped up, but the female main character was a soundboard for all of the heroes' problems, and she was the cool girl who didn't have a problem with any of the things that he did, and situations that she justifiably could have been angry at him for doing, like leaving her out in the cold with the door locked and not getting there, so she quite literally has a panic attack and can't breathe and has to be taken to the hospital. Things that she legitimately could have been angry about, she was just like, I'm cool, we're good, I don't care, everything's fine. I don't like that. I don't like the perpetuation of the cool girl stereotype where women just have to take whatever men give them. I hate that, and it was so annoying, and it made me angry. The next is The Kiss Thief, which is an arranged marriage situation between a senator and a mob boss's daughter. This is age gap. She's 19, he's 37 or something, I think. Their relationship is so immature, and there is a very, very uncomfortable first time scene where he thinks that she's not a virgin, but she is, and they have an argument, and it's very questionable and uncomfortable, and like she consents, but it's super uncomfortable. And then also there's like 70% of the way through, there's a trope that I cannot stand, that I won't spoil, but horrible. And then the next three, really, I barely remember. So the first is Party of Two, which is a romance between a senator and a lawyer in California, and it's fade to black, and the romance is bad, it's boring, the conflict is really boring, it centers around him being a politician and all that stuff. Incredibly boring. Then The Deal, which is a friends to lovers fake dating between a hockey player and just like a musician girl. I don't remember anything about this. This is super hyped up, and I cannot tell you a single thing about it. All I remember is the conflict being miscommunication, which is super annoying. And then the last one is Cursed, which is the first book in a paranormal romance series that's really, really badly written. The biggest case of insta-love that I think I've ever seen, and just really bad. All right, so let's go on to the best of the best. The hot, not bothered. First is Go Deep by Rosie Adams. I have another Rosie Adams on this list, so Go Deep and Will You Be Mine both are friends to lovers. Go Deep is about a erotica author who needs some spice, who needs her mojo back, so she enlists the help of her best friend, and it's perfection. There's a restaurant scene that I still think about every day. And then Will You Be Mine is a friends to lovers where a girl needs a date to her ex-best friend's wedding. Super emotional, deals with some really, really hard topics, loss of a child, all of that. And the main male character is so sweet. Like, he's loved her forever, and he's like, we'll just be friends, like, it's fine. And, you know, I'm not gonna demand more from her. Like, she's just my best friend, and whatever she wants, and it is so sweet. Oh, and so steamy. They are both. So next up is The Kiss Quotient, which is the story of an autistic economist, I think is what she is, and her romance with an escort that she hires to kind of teach her the ways of sex, because she's never really had like a strong, good sex life, and so she wants to learn what pleases her and how to like, what it's like, basically. And it is so sweet and tender, and I think this book is so important because it pulls in a lot of people that have never seen themselves in a romance before. The relationship is so sweet, and the male main character loves to sew, and he likes fashion, and the female main character is very straightforward, very straight, like she is very focused, and he never demands anything out of her. He notices like her behavior is different than the normal person's, like she has touch aversion and all that, but he never questions her, he never makes fun of her, he lets her just live how she wants to live and just is happy to be in her life, and it is so sweet, and I love it so much. We have Birthday Girl by the Queen, Penelope Douglas. This is an age gap between a 19-year-old and a 40-year-old or 38-year-old. He is her boyfriend's dad. It is so good. I have reread it 3 times this year, and Penelope Douglas is so fantastic about writing tension. Like, her tension between characters, their character development, like why you can see why they would want to be together, and it's just, she's so brilliant and so good. And so next up is, it's a romance technically, but I wouldn't really call it that. It's between a woman in college and her professor. I don't really feel like this is like a study in romance. I think it's more considered like a healthy relationship, and the important ways that we can be what people need at that moment without any sort of like judgment, be the thing that that person needs. So the female main character really needs someone to obsess about, and she needs someone to take care of her, and the male main character needs someone that needs him, and he needs to be in control, and he needs to have someone to take care of. And so though their relationship isn't necessarily healthy and they are with each other for all of the wrong reasons, I definitely think that it is a fantastically done story about the different ways that people are there for each other, even if on the outside it doesn't look healthy or look like it is romantic, if that makes sense. So next up is actually the very first romance that I like, straight romance that I read. I think this is the only LJ Shen book that I was wholly on board with. This is a bully romance between 2 characters who met in high school. One, Vicious, is from a very rich family, and he has like all rich friends, and he's like the king of the school, and his family's maid's daughter, who witnesses something happen to him that he's really ashamed that she saw, and so he really pushes her away, and he tries to get her to hate him, and ultimately he runs her out of town. And then in the present, when they're both adults, she's looking for a job, and so she starts working for him, and it goes from there. And it's really good. And LJ Shin kind of does the same irredeemable bastard character, male character, in every story, but I think because this was the first one, I was just blown away. Like, I loved it so much. I loved their relationship. I still love their relationship. They're my favorite in the whole series. I listened to the audiobook, and the narrator's voice for Vicious was so good. So the next one up on this list was a book that I originally read and was just kind of like okay with. Like, I recognized that it was good, it was steamy, it was sexy, it was all of those things, but as I think about it more, I love it more and more. And it is a novella. It is Only for a Night, which is the first book in the Lick series, which follows 3 guys who own a sex club. And in the first one, it's a like second chance thing, and the woman that got away comes to the main male character and says like, I want a night to figure out what I like, basically. And so they do that. What I really liked about this is the conversations that the book deals with. So it deals a lot with like women's pleasure and women having to hide wanting things, like having to kind of just take what they're given and fake it or not get it at all. This is funneled through a ex-husband that was abusive, and so when she tried to say like, this is what I want to try this, he really degraded her, and so she felt like she wasn't good enough, or the things that she wanted weren't good. And so when he passes, she wants to figure out what she likes, basically. And I loved this. I loved the conversations that were going on. I loved that she was exploring, and that there were conversations about women having to hide what they want, hide what they like, and kind of just deal with whatever is given to them. I loved it so much. And it's so steamy. All right, so then the next up is The Air He Breathes, which is the first in the Elements series by Brittany C. Cherry. This follows 2 people who have both lost their spouses, and one has a kid and one doesn't anymore. So triggers for loss of a child, and spouse, obviously. The relationship initially starts out as kind of like a using each other to fill the void where their spouse is left, and then eventually it goes on to something more meaningful. This is such an emotional read, and like you feel so connected to the characters, and you feel so connected to the relationship, and you want the relationship to work, and you want them to find solace in each other. You are reading them dealing with their grief and like struggling to move on, because what does that mean for their spouse? And it tugs on the heartstrings, and it's so emotional, and it's so good. It's so good. The whole series that I've read so far is really good. I have 2 more for you. So the next one is going to be Kill Switch by Penelope Douglas, which is the 3rd book in the Devil's Night series, which you do have to read the other books first before you get to this one. But this follows Damon and Winter, who Damon has been like the villain in the story up until this point. And I don't even know what to say at this point. Like, it's very much a cat and mouse game, and very like alpha, and Damon is very much of a jerk, and Winter gives it back just as good as she gets, and it's just so good. And their relationship is so good, and like I said, Penelope Douglas is so good at writing believable, understandable relationships that you just want to work. And then the last one I have is kind of a shocker, and that is The Unhoneymooners by Christina Lauren. I have read several books by them, but this kind of fluffy is not really my thing. I read this at the perfect time. I was going through some stuff dealing with my animals, so I just needed like a pick-me-up, and this was absolutely perfect. This is about 2 people who have always kind of not gotten along, but his brother and her sister got married, or getting married, and on the wedding day everyone gets food poisoning but them, and so they are forced to go on the honeymoon together and pretend to be the married couple, because the trip is non-refundable, so they have to pretend to be in a relationship. And it's so sweet and so fluffy, and there's like this beachy theme, and they are doing all of like these beachy things, and it's really well written and really, really, really good. And I felt like it kind of teetered off once they got back to like real world, I guess. Super good, and just exactly what I needed when I read it. Those are my best and worst of 2020. I really would love to hear your guys' thoughts on the books that I talked about in this video, so make sure you comment your thoughts down below. But other than that, I will see you guys in my next video. Thanks so much for watching.